Hello everybody, and welcome back to Let's Play Diddy Kong Racing, where the computer is going to die. We have one character left to use, and it is the best character in the game. We've seen him constantly throughout the game. He's made my life miserable through time trials, but finally, he's honking his way up to Future Funland. It is time to play as TT. And TT's responsibility is the final set of silver coin challenges. These aren't too difficult in Future Funland, with the exception mostly of the plane levels, because you'll have noticed the plane levels in Future Funland, they're all very open, they're all very wide. Most of them have little shortcuts and hazards that can punish you pretty severely for going off the beaten path, such as that little section there. So as a result, some of the silver coins can be very difficult to grab on your first lap. Some of them are even more difficult to see. I took a huge detour there thinking there might be one behind that pillar. It would seem like fairly solid design here to put one behind one of these pillars, but they don't do it, they just put it directly in the middle there, and I still managed to miss it. So TT's basic stats are brutal, really. You will have lost a lot of friends if you consistently picked him in versus races. I know my group of friends, we had house rules with regards to TT. Basically, if you lost 3 races in a row, you got to play as TT until you won a race. It was useful both as a way of allowing people to use TT. After all, most of us who owned the game, we had gone to great lengths and ridiculous difficulty to unlock him as 12, 13-year-olds at least. We'd gone to a lot of effort to unlock him, so we figured it wasn't right to just have a blanket ban on using him. So he ended up being more of a balancing tool to those people in our group of friends who didn't have N64s, some of them were PlayStation kids, or just didn't have Diddy Kong Racing. This is probably the biggest race, and as it was the first one I did, I was afraid this was going to set the standard of having to clamour for the silver coins before making one giant comeback. And while that does happen in places in this video, it's not something I was doing constantly. Certainly not as much as I feared. But one track down, and Dark Moon Caverns hates me. I included this because I thought this final lap, I mean, if you've seen the time trial video for Future Funland, you'll have seen the pain the Dark Moon Caverns caused me there. But I thought this final lap, I thought was just such a fantastic comeback. I had to include it in the video. I've got 7 silver coins here, because Dark Moon Caverns, they're not difficult to see, but they are difficult to grab, especially with the way the track undulates and changes height constantly. It's a very bumpy track, very hard to hold a line, so grabbing silver coins can be very difficult. I will freely say I was nowhere near that coin when I grabbed it, but in the end, first place was just way too far ahead. And it was tipped up, go figure. So let's do this properly now. One thing I don't think I mentioned yet is if you finish in a certain position If you have to retry a race, you may have noticed this already from the many times I've had to retry races. If you retry a race, your grid position for the next race will be the position you finished in. So I finished second in that last race and started second on the grid in this race. It can be useful for the silver coin challenges. I don't think I've mentioned this before, but starting on some of the earlier tracks, starting in 4th place starting 4th on the grid will actually give you a much better line onto the first coin of the track. And I absolutely smoked the silver coins on this track. Knowing exactly where they were from that first run, it was just a case for me of going around, just going around carefully, making sure I held my line, and just grabbing them. I mean, you really need to slalom slightly on that section of the track with the craters, because there are 2 coins there, and if you slalom you can grab them both. If you slalom the right way at least, if you go to the left, to the right of the first crater. But if you go to the left, you're either going to be doubling back or having to grab them both on separate laps. I don't know of anyone who goes to the left of the crater though, especially if you're trying to keep a racing line. Another thing about Future Funland that I think really sets it out as one of the final set of tracks is that the weapon balloons are really spread out, and there's a vast variety of them. Like you'll notice there's not huge swathes of track where there's nothing but reds or nothing but blues. It's all mixed together, and that makes it a lot harder to get the higher level weapons. And in versus races, that can make these tracks, while they are hard tracks to race, so the people who have the game are still going to have the advantage, it makes it slightly easier I think, for the less experienced players, because they don't have to worry about upgrading their power-ups. They can just grab it, fire it, and try to create a huge melee to maintain their position. On to Spaceport Alpha.
Spaceport Alpha.
If you think that coin is right up against the wall, it is. The coins in Spaceport Alpha are probably the hardest in this world, because I was going all over these 2 giant rooms that are in here. I was going way off course in those just because I remember there being coins in the corners, and I know someone's going to say in the thread, yep, they are there in Adventure 2. And that trench, I think, is a great example of, I mean, I know it's something I've brought up a lot, whether it was track design or silver coins that came first. And I think this track just adds more weight to the idea that it was track design. Track design came before silver coins. And it's especially noticeable in that trench because there's nothing at the base in that trench. Like, the lasers don't fire down that low. So I can see in playtesting the testers going, there's no real reason for anyone to come off the bottom. I mean, that first zipper is relatively close to the bottom, and the second one doesn't give you too much of enough of an advantage to justify the risk. So it's an area where the silver coins have really helped this track, because having 2 silver coins demand that you come off the base of the trench. Both that second silver coin in the trench that I grabbed on the first lap, and this second silver coin that's right up at the top here, because you can't scoot along the bottom and then shoot up for that. But no character in the plane has that level of ascent ascend skill. And I do my loop over the line and completely screw the camera over, which I thought was pretty funny. One more balloon, and it's in Star City.
Star City.
These silver coins are ridiculously easy. I think this was the easiest silver coin challenge I'd done since, I think, Ancient Lake. And I think to a certain degree it's even easier, because there's none of them hidden out the way. Even I didn't think the designers would be enough of a dick to put one off that bridge. And I think there's 4 of them are in that section there, and I was nowhere near that one again, so fantastic collision detection in their game. But yeah, that's it. 40 seconds into the first lap, and we have them all. And as you would have seen from the time trial video, I have absolutely no problem with this track whatsoever. The zipper there did give me a slight heart attack. I was incredibly scared that I was going to drop off the bridge there, and I think I could have recovered, but it wasn't worth taking the risk. And you'll see that on the next lap. Yeah, TT's basic stats are he's technically a heavyweight, and he has some of the heavyweight traits, like his drift and his skid are fairly cumbersome and pretty tricky to get used to, especially if you're expecting him to be this giant badass character. He does take a little getting used to. But his skid is pretty cumbersome since he's a heavyweight. But his top speed is maximum. I think it's equal, if not slightly better than Crunch's. His acceleration is that of a lightweight, and his base handling is also pretty much that of a lightweight, so he's the best of all worlds. And that makes him hugely dangerous. And I did deliberately run into that Spaceport. I wanted to see if it was on the line enough to give me the win. And it was, so jackpot. That banana is hogging all the spotlight in this video. Into the dark abyss. The next video is the final Whiz Pig, and I'll see you then. Bye bye.